This is the Healing Power of Probiotics, a 5-part discovery series about how probiotics can help with infections and other health challenges. And welcome. My name is Michelle Moore, and I'm a biologist and a microbiologist, and also author of MRSA Secrets Revealed and C. difficile treatments and remedies. And I worked as a microbiologist for over 10 years in the biotech and pharmaceutical industries, and also at that time suffered for about 4 years with recurring antibiotic resistant infections in which my doctor could not help me get over. We tried numerous antibiotics over and over, and they never made a difference. And so it actually took me getting out on my own, doing my own research and discovery into holistic health to get over those infections, and gladly I did so. And my husband Les and I started our company called Embrace Health, and through our books and our websites we've been helping people with all kinds of recurring infections since 2008. Okay, some key questions we often hear about regarding probiotics is distinguishing one probiotic from another. Is it good or not? Which probiotics are good if you have skin infections or internal infections like MRSA or staph, or gut infections like C. diff? What steps can you take to get the most benefit from your probiotics? Finding good quality probiotics, and what health challenges can probiotics help you with? And these are all great questions, and I'll be answering them throughout this series. All right, let's get started with session 1, and we're going to start with the microbiome. All right, what is your microbiome? Now, I first want to discuss the microbiome because having an understanding of this complex ecosystem is really vital to helping you make the most of your probiotics and understand how it's really tied into your overall health. Now, your microbiome is made up of all the microorganisms that live on you and inside of you. They're mostly bacteria, but they also include fungi, yeast, and viruses. So all of those together make up your microbiome. And there's been a lot of recent scientific discoveries that are really telling us how this microbiome plays and ties into our health and our disease. The Human Microbiome Project basically started all of this new understanding of the microbiome, and it's amazing how much we've learned from this particular project. Now, it's part of the National Institute of Health, and this study basically characterized the microbiome of 250 healthy people, and they collected samples from all over the body, about 15 to 18 different sites. And it was the largest and most thorough study ever performed, looking at the composition of what makes up, the types of all these organisms. And they really wanted to look at the unique composition of the microbiome to see how it correlates to either health or to disease. And they used a lot of genomic sequencing, basically, that's primarily their tool, or DNA type sequencing, to catalog exactly what types of microorganisms made up each of these test areas that they looked at on people and inside of them. And I can tell you, when I was back in school, our understanding of bacteria was extremely different than it is now, and the technology is just light years ahead of where it used to be, and this whole field has just changed dramatically. And with these major advances in genomic sequencing, it's now been brought down to the consumer level, which you've probably seen ads on TV for the 23andMe and Ancestry.com, those test kits you can buy. Those are genomic sequencing kits, and basically that same type of technology was used to characterize the microbes living in all these different locations and all these people. So you might have heard already that the organisms that live inside of you greatly outnumber your own human cells, basically by a factor of 10 to 1. you have 10 times the amount of bacterial cells as human cells, and that's actually pretty staggering when you think about it, and the implications of how these microbes tie into our overall health. And our own bodies as humans actually utilize the DNA of bacteria for their own functions. So we're really kind of like one organism in a sense. The other interesting thing about your microbiome is how complex and diverse it is. It's not just a couple of species of bacteria or fungus or yeast, but it's at least what they believe so far, at least 1,000 different species of bacteria and different organisms that make up your microbiome. And that's out of a possible 30 to 35,000 different species of organisms that we're currently aware of. So there is a lot of diversity in each person's microbiome. And there's native species, kind of what's unique to each individual. And what's also interesting is that the microbiome can be largely similar between people, but even with identical twins, the microbiome can be very different. So it's, in a sense, it's unique to you as a person, almost like your fingerprint. Now, most of the species that make up the microbiome are harmless or beneficial to you as a human. And all these different organisms really talk to each other, they communicate with each other, they're aware of each other, and it's really like a rainforest when you think of it that way, as a complex ecosystem. If you think of a rainforest with all the different plants and trees and ferns and flowers, and there's animals that live there, and there's insects and reptiles, and they all live together in this complex way that's really intertwined with each other. That's kind of a way to think about how your microbiome works, all in a natural balance with each other. Your microbiome also keeps you alive. You may have heard the statistic, somewhere between 60 to 80% of your immune system is directly correlated to the health of your microbiome. Your microbiome also helps you digest foods. When you eat proteins and starches, it helps break those down. And when those are broken down, it helps absorb the nutrients as well. It also creates important vitamins, notably the B vitamins, vitamin K. Your microbiome also creates proteins that you can't. It produces neurotransmitters that are tied into our mental health. And of interest, it also produces antibiotics, which is a bit surprising, but we'll talk more about this later. Your microbiome is really responsible for a large part of the human body metabolic functions. And, until recently, people have really thought of their microbiome as separate from themselves. But this is kind of a way of really thinking about them as part of us. Your microbiome is actually also part of your first line of defense against infections. Whether it's a skin infection, your skin has its own microbiome that's composed of all different kinds of organisms, and they will help fight off invading organisms. If it's in your gut and there's C. difficile in there that's trying to overgrow, well, there's different organisms in there that will help try to fight it back. Also colds and flu, it also helps you from getting those as well. So it has a first line of defense function as well. Perhaps you've heard this quote from Hippocrates that all disease begins in the gut. Now, Hippocrates was a Greek physician who was born almost 2,500 years ago, and he had some really keen insight from so far long ago about the importance of our gut to our overall health. And actually, the majority of our microbiome is located in our digestive system. And if you took all those organisms that were in there, they would weigh about 3 pounds. So, if all disease begins in the gut, then health must also begin in the gut. Dysbiosis is another term for an unbalanced microbiome, and that leads to disease. So chronic diseases like IBS, IBD, asthma and allergies, autoimmune diseases, depression, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and even cancer are tied to a disruption in healthy flora. Now, the Human Microbiome Project discovered that healthy people have about 85% good organisms to 15% bad microorganisms. And that's pretty amazing when you look at this, because organisms like C. difficile, Candida, and H. pylori are actually normal inhabitants of your gut, especially for healthy people. And they only become a problem if the microbiome becomes out of balance. So this is a major change in how we look at diseases, because I remember back in school, what they called germ theory really led the way from the late 1800s, meaning that if a pathogen finds you and you get it, then you become sick. However, this microbiome project showed us that healthy people carry pathogenic species and they can be totally healthy. So what this really means is the internal terrain, the balance of your microbiome is really what is most important, not the absence of pathogens. This is a major change in thinking, and we really need to think about balance and not killing. Unhealthy flora also leads to leaky gut, which you may have heard of as well, which opens the door to inflammation throughout your body, and also hundreds of chronic diseases and autoimmune conditions. And of course, if your gut flora is out of balance, that's tied directly to gut infections, whether it's Candida, C. difficile, SIBO, the small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, IBS, IBD, that's correlated as well. And of course, antibiotics are often a major cause of creating an unbalanced microbiome, because they may kill an infection if it's in the GI tract or on the skin, wherever you're looking to kill that infection, but they also kill your good bacteria that create the balance, and it kind of creates a vacuum for other species to come in and take over and create that unbalanced microbiome. Well, we're really in our infancy of understanding the microbiome and all the factors that harm it, but we do know quite a few areas of concern. Antibiotic drugs that I already alluded to before are obviously a major factor when it comes to your microbiome. In fact, some scientists, I've heard ranges from a year, that it can take up to a year to regain your balanced terrain after the use of antibiotics, and some scientists actually believe you can never regain your original composition of flora after the use of antibiotics. Drugs like Advil and proton pump inhibitors also adversely affect your microbiome. Antibacterial soaps and products that have triclosan, which has been banned, but there are other chemical antibacterials that can be found in soaps, toothpaste, mouthwash. All that affects your skin. It goes into your mouth. It affects the bacteria in your mouth. That, of course, gets swallowed and go into your GI microbiome. Obviously, if you have a poor diet where you're eating sugary foods, carbohydrates that are simple carbohydrates like white bread and pastas, those get converted to sugars. Those sugars feed more strains that would be considered more pathogenic, that they're kind of more on the bad side and can sway the microbiome in their favor. If you don't eat organic meat and dairy products, there are antibiotics in those foods. So when you eat them, those antibiotics end up in your GI system and they're going to affect your microbiome. If you're drinking non-filtered water, just straight tap water that's been chlorinated, usually city water, that's going to have chlorine in it, and the chlorine will also affect and alter and shift the composition of bacteria in your gut. Stress and lack of sleep also are found to harm your microbiome. Another one is actually cesarean sections. If babies are not born normally via the vaginal birth canal, they don't get seeded with those healthy bacteria from the mother that they would normally, and that actually adversely affects their microbiome. Another one people aren't as familiar with is pesticides and herbicides, and the weed spray you've heard of, I'm sure, Roundup. It contains a chemical called glyphosate, and that glyphosate chemical, which is one of the active ingredients, actually has been patented as an antibiotic, if you can believe that. And so if you eat foods that contain glyphosate, which if you're eating corn and wheat and soy, those are some big ones. If they're not organic, maybe even if they are, but if they're not organic, they're going to contain glyphosate in many cases. And again, when that is ingested into the GI system, that glyphosate can adversely affect your microbiome. And I talk more about this in my C. difficile book that I have. All right, well, what's going to help your microbiome? Probiotics, the subject of this series. And daily probiotics goes a long way toward helping shift that microbiome back into your favor. If you can reduce sugar and those high carbohydrate foods, the highly processed foods, donuts and breads and pastries and pastas, things that are easily broken down into sugar. Eating an immune boosting diet is also another good way to do it. When you're eating more raw vegetables and cooked vegetables and produce and fruits, more whole raw foods are great as well. If you can also drink purified water and use a filter to remove the chlorine from the water, and usually just activated charcoal will pull that out, and there's many kinds of water filters you can get on the market now. Managing your stress and getting a good, at least 8 hours of sleep a night will go a long way toward helping your microbiome. And of course, if you can eat more organic foods and avoiding genetically modified foods, those are foods that, again, have been sprayed with Roundup with the glyphosate chemical that's inside of the Roundup. That will also help. And if you have the opportunity to use antibiotic alternatives, they're generally a lot more easier on your microbiome than a hard-hitting antibiotic would be. So the green circle, all these in that circle are basically lifestyle choices, and these are all positive steps you can take in your daily life that are going to benefit your overall health because you're helping rebalance your microbiome. Immune boosting diet can include organic vegetables and fruit, grass-fed meat, whether it's beef or chicken, grass-fed beef, I should say, chicken if it's organic as well, wild seafood, leafy greens, etc. Those are some great immune-boosting type foods. Prebiotic foods are foods that actually feed the good bacteria in your GI system. That can be dandelion greens, onions, garlic, leeks. These are all eaten by bifidobacteria, which are one of the main classes or genus, I should say, of bacteria that live in your colon. Live probiotic foods are also a great way to help your microbiome, and that includes sauerkraut, any kind of fermented vegetables. It could be carrots or ginger or garlic. You can kind of go crazy with that. And any non-GMO fermented soy like tempeh or miso, Those are also good live foods. Now, probiotics and antibiotic alternatives, if you need those are supplements, and those are simple things you can do on a daily basis that can make a big difference on their own. It's not a lifestyle change, but it's a simple thing you can do to help your health. All right. We've covered a lot of information so far in this first series covering the microbiome, but here's a few take-home points for you. Basically, on a cellular basis, you are more bacterial than you are human, so it's important to always remember your microbe community, that it's really you. Your microbiome is so complex and diverse, and you can't exist without it. And also, it's important to think about pathogens in a different light, that they're actually natural inhabitants in a healthy microbiome, and they don't become a problem unless the balance of your microbiome is lost. So we really want to keep that microbiome in balance. So it's more about that than eradicating your pathogens if you happen to have a sickness. And many diseases are, of course, linked to the disruption of the microbiome. So you really can't be healthy if your microbiome isn't also healthy. Okay, well, this concludes session number 1, the microbiome revealed. Be sure to watch the next 4 video sessions I've created to discover 5 probiotic myths, 5 traits of true probiotics, and how to restore your gut and strengthen your immune system using probiotics. You'll also find out why most probiotics fail and discover the potency and healing properties of spore-forming probiotics. Be sure to register for free today at the web address in the description below to see all 5 sessions of my e-course. Thank you.